My colleagues and I live in fear of getting some kind of reward. This year they mind me. I watched with my mouth dry and my heart pounding, to a message from my boss. It's a terrible combination of words. My colleagues and I pray that we will never see him again. You are applying for the Employee of the Year title for our boss. Sending something so heartless by email is like sprinkling salt on a wound. My eyes skimmed over the wall of text that followed this message. I didn't need to read the details. I had worked hard enough to remove all the leftovers from past nominees for this title, and I knew exactly what this award would entail. After this initial wild attack of fear subsided, denial took its place. Let me explain everything to you about this title. As strange as it may sound, the nominee is not the best seller of our store, but on the contrary, the worst. I didn't just meet my sales quota. I was ahead of everyone so much that only my heels sparkled. I sold expensive goods almost every day. I also never forgot to stick my barcode stickers on them so that when my customers placed an order and it was scanned at the checkout, all sales automatically went to my name. We do not receive a commission. There are other incentives to keep our sales at a high level. I didn't keep track of the numbers because I knew that I was constantly making very successful sales. It never even occurred to me that I was at risk. It's just a glitch in our computer system, I decided with a nervous laugh. Yes, this is definitely something that our IT specialists will be able to handle in the shortest possible time. When I finally regained control of my legs, which were shaking wildly, I hobbled to my manager's office. There was no miscalculation, he assured me. He showed me his laptop screen. At the bottom was my number. Barcodes never lie to Graham. He didn't even bother to look me in the eye. In my mind, I've already been flushed down the sewers, and if I can't get myself together, I'll literally be flushed down the drain soon. I asked him to look at the camera footage. I knew he would be able to see me making all these sales. Don't worry, he added, with an empty smile. One way or another, we all contribute to the success of our company. I believe that by that time he had long since lost his sensitivity to the pleas of the desperate. Leaving his office, I assured myself that this was a non-death sentence. Not yet. I had another month until the bosses recalculated our final results before this shit became a reality. I used to be given a limp handshake and an empty thank you for your dedication to the company when the year was coming to an end. But very soon I will meet something that lives behind a usually locked door in a dark corner of the recreation room. Very soon I will find out what it really means to sacrifice myself for the good of the company. The rumors spread quickly through the store. Kevin gave me his smug, shitty grin. Maybe he thought that if I was gone, he would finally have the opportunity to take care of Eliza. I just hoped that she would not be the one who would hose down what was left of me from the floor and then go down the rusty, dirty sewer. As required by the rules, I started parking in my new, specially designated place at the far end of the employee parking lot, a faded sign with the inscription, "Only for the Employee of the Year." It was further than other parking lots. It took another 10 minutes to walk to the store. Anyway, I won't have this parking space in a month. If I'd been lucky, I would have lived to see next summer, lived to see some other poor guy's car parked there. Even if some of my colleagues haven't heard the news yet, they've already figured it out from my car parked in that area. We didn't get too attached to each other. They started avoiding me like the plague. I didn't blame them. We all knew what was going to happen next. If my sales don't increase, everything will happen the way it happens every time. We were going to a mandatory meeting on the last night of the fiscal year. All eyes were on the unfortunate man who had won the room. It was always so quiet that you could hear his muffled sobs. At first, he received hardly a handshake from our manager, while he muttered something about appreciation for the dedication of the company with dead eyes. Then the winner was escorted to the recreation room for a corporate meeting. No one tried to escape. We all knew that it would be worse after that incident in 2019. Instead, the winner always turned back, giving us a desperate last look, eyes pleading with someone, anyone, to intervene. And of course no one ever interfered. As soon as the door closed behind him and the soundproof room absorbed him, the last sobs and pleas were over, and the rest of us were sent home, and I always tried to drive them away. It's a disgusting feeling. It's a painful feeling of relief that someone else was sent to die, not me. Cal is the nicest guy I've ever met. 2 years ago, he was the worst player. One day he became very ill and could hardly work. He must have thought it freed him from his contract. If he leaves, if he never comes back to work with him, everything will be fine. He must not have read the line printed in small print on our employment documents, although to be honest, if any of us had read it, we would never have signed this contract. Cal was a warning to all of us that you can't just quit your job here if they have to track you down and find you, and I promise you they'll definitely find you. Well, wouldn't it be better to leave with dignity, with compensation that your family will receive, instead of kicking and screaming in the middle of the night while you are being dragged out of your house? Gina became an Employee of the Year in 2023. Gina has the kindest smile in the world. Kevin had set his sights on her before Eliza, and like Eliza, she wanted nothing to do with him. I still remember the day when the final figures were published, how Gina's family was opened out of confusion and shock. When she finally managed to put the words back into a sentence, she also insisted that there must have been some mistake. We all vouched for her to the management. I personally saw how she achieved a lot of sales. Our manager just reminded us that barcodes never lie. The next morning, I was called to duty in the break room to take what was left of her and her gold wedding ring and return it to her family. A week later, her loved ones received a box with everything that was left of Gina and a check for a round sum. As soon as the numbers are finally determined, as soon as your 3 code is applied to this harmless-looking pink letterhead, your fate is sealed. In all his years at the company, Kevin has never parked on the far side of the parking lot. He's not even close to becoming Employee of the Year, although he wouldn't be able to sell a bottle of water to a man dying of thirst. He's the epitome of meanness, and he doesn't even have the charisma to hide it. I never understood how he was still holding up, but I couldn't afford to think too much about him. I had to worry about myself and this glitch in the system. Every time I found myself in the break room to clean up the remains, this ancient wooden door was an unwelcome reminder of the upcoming one-way trip. I paid special attention to keeping an eye on my sales. Working hard, working 2 shifts. As the end of the month approached, I found out my stats and couldn't believe it. I was still the last one. For some reason, on some days less than half of my sales were listed on mine. I didn't understand the score. I was waiting for an opportunity to get into the manager's office and show him the surveillance footage. I wanted to show him that something was wrong with the calculations, that the system was broken. I finally got my chance. At first, I watched in triumph as I made sale after sale of much more than was credited to my account. For the first time in a month, I felt relieved. I had proof that I was right. I switched to the camera located closer to the cash register to make sure that the codes are scanned. I have seen several successfully scanned barcodes and have already reached out to turn off the recording. That's when I saw it. I saw him, Kevin. And that was clever, I have to admit it. At first I didn't understand what he was doing until I caught a pattern. Even then, I had to rewind and look again to understand everything that day. This happened to almost half of my sales. I saw him intercept customers before they had time to place an order before I could get points for my sales, and while he was chatting with them, he discreetly pasted his barcode on top of mine. That night I met him. I was furious, and he just smiled and talked smugly about how barcodes never lie. He didn't give a damn that he was condemning a man to death. Maybe he even liked it. And then I realized that Kevin had done the same thing to Jean, stealing her sales, and maybe to someone else. Fucking Kevin. On the day we needed to take stock, he had the audacity to place his barcode on top of mine at a huge sale I was making, and he didn't even try to hide it. He did it right in front of me, and he gave me a smile. I caught up with the customers before they left, and they kindly let me take off the sticker. I put it in my pocket to show the manager, and he took the footage from the cameras and stormed into his office, refusing to leave until he looked at them. His eyes moved across the screen, and I couldn't tell if he was angry or surprised, because his face expressed absolutely nothing. Finally, he met my gaze. He was very sad and gloomy. At first I felt relieved, until I realized why his gaze was like that. He whispered, "I'm sorry to Graham tomorrow. Someone has to get this award. It's not in my power." I silently handed him the damn Kevin barcode sticker that I had peeled off. He studied it for a long time before returning it to me, simply saying, "Why don't you keep it for yourself?" At lunch, I told Eliza about what had happened, and although I was pleased that she was also outraged by all this, I had already accepted my fate. Actually, I just wanted to warn her, because I was sure that the next person Kevin would do this to would be her. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't devastated when my boss called me into his office that night and gave me the final results. Yes, I knew this was going to happen, but I think it's just human nature. To go into denial to the last, not to lose hope until the bitter end. It seemed like forever. We looked at each other in silence. The presence of the pink slip lying on the table between us said more than enough. Finally, my gaze settled on him. The form has already been signed. There is only an empty space for my barcode, a series of black and white lines marking my death sentence. I didn't know how the whole part went, because it took place behind closed doors. No one who has ever filled out this form has lived to tell the rest of us about it. I need you to post a Trich code here before I send the form to the company. Finally, he said. I opened my mouth to make a last plea for my life, but he interrupted me. He spoke each word slowly and quietly. "I'm leaving the room now. I need you to place a Shahir 3 code before I send the form to the company." He looked at me for a long time, waiting for my barely noticeable nod of confirmation before leaving me alone in the office. They completed the paperwork and announced the Employee of the Year the next day. Yes, I admit, I felt a little ashamed when I watched Kevin's smug grin disappear from his face, as the blood drained from his face when he looked in shock at our manager's outstretched hand thanking him for his dedication to our company. I felt it, again, watching Kevin. All the way to the break room, he begs all of us to help him, because there was some kind of misunderstanding. We have already heard all these mantras thousands of times. Barcodes never lie, but I thought of Gene, of countless others, and by the time I heard the door slam behind him, the guilt had already gone. Instead, it was a relief to know that the rest of us were safe. Well, at least until next year.